right, we're looking good. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Travis Audubon's Summer Lunch Series. Today's topic is binoculars for birding with Marcie Hysinger. My name is Kelsey, and I'm the development manager here at Travis Audubon. Thank you all so much for joining us today. So we have just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Today, if you'd like, you can keep your cameras on, but during the presentation, we just ask that you keep your microphones muted. But if you have questions or comments, just leave them in the chat box because at the end of the presentation, we'll have time for a Q&A session. So with that, we can just jump right in with a little more information about Marcie. Marcie is an owner of Land, Sea, and Sky in Houston, a store that has been providing optics sales and repairs since 1940. You may have met Marcie or one of her crew at one of the many birding festivals and events in person and online, where she gets to share her love of birding and optics. If you are in the market for new binoculars, be sure to stick around today for a special discount for all of the attendees of today's presentation. We'll have that discount in the chat box, but it's only good for a couple days, so use it while it lasts. So Marcie, thank you so much for being here today. We're really excited to hear from you, and I'll just let you take it away.
Thank you, Kelsey. Hi, everybody. As Kelsey mentioned, I'm Marcie from Land, Sea, and Sky in Houston, and our company sells lots of different optics like this little spotting scope here. For the birding community, we do binoculars and spotting scopes and accessories for those primarily. We also sell telescopes for astronomy and astrophotography equipment as well, microscopes to all sorts of clinics, hospitals, veterinarian practices, colleges, universities, things of that nature. And then we have a second part to our business, the service and repair part. So we have technicians here that do service and repair for all of those things, both here in Houston and offsite on campuses across Texas and hospitals and things. But for today's purposes, we're going to talk about some birds and some binoculars. So the first thing I'd like to do is start with the very important parts of a binocular, and I'll be brief in case you guys already know this, but sometimes this is a good place to start. So this is the little Koa BD2 binocular in an 8x32, and I'm going to use it because they so generously made all these parts different colors, so it's really easy to see the difference. So this is the bit where you put this up to your eyes and look through the binocular, and we call this the eye cup. If I'm not wearing my glasses, I want to roll that eye cup all the way up. If I am wearing my glasses, so it would look like this. If I am wearing my glasses, I want to keep that down and put the binoculars right up against my glasses. And what I've done is effectively just take up that bit of difference in space that my glasses are taking up. They call that eye relief. So again, that's the eye cups. Another important part is the hinge. We call that a central hinge. And as I pull down on the barrels, that hinge is going to accommodate a different interpupillary distance. So the difference between your two eyeballs. And that's important, particularly for those who have very narrow set eyes or very wide set eyes. And this is a neat binocular. It can accommodate a huge range, as you see here, of interpupillary distance. If you've ever looked through binoculars and there's that weird kind of crescent shaped dark bit on the edge, you just don't have the interpupillary distance exactly right yet. So keep playing with that until you get one good cohesive image in either a circle of some sort, either circular or slightly oval shaped. But you should get one really comfortable cohesive image without those dark crescents on the edge. And then you have that set just right. The next piece that's important is, of course, the focus wheel. So in most binoculars these days, I'll be looking like this through my binoculars, and the focus wheel is going to be in the center and pretty easy and robust to turn. One of the reasons we like to go out into the field to festivals and to visit the different Audubon societies and things is it's really good to try out binoculars in person, because these focus wheels are really different on different brands of binoculars. On some, you feel like you really turn quite a lot to get to focus, and on others, it has a really fast focus, so you're not turning much. it's not intuitive to know what's going to be best for you without trying out a few different pairs and just doing a little compare and contrast. We're all a little bit different, and getting a feel for the focus wheel is important. So just to recap, so far we've had the eye cups, up if you're not wearing glasses, down if you are, interpupillary distance by using this center hinge, focus in the focus wheel. And then we also have, this is the objective lens on the outside edge, the one closest to the bird that you're looking at. Some binoculars these days come with this, it's called an objective cover. It's nice, right? Because you can protect that lens, particularly for when you're traveling with the binocular. That can be a nice feature. You don't have to keep them on the binoculars. If you don't love that, then they can be taken off. This is really just like a rubber band. It's held on just by the tension of the shape. And so those can be taken off if you don't care for that. But if you're someone who's really fastidious about keeping their equipment clean, that can be quite handy. One thing I didn't know until I came to work for Lancy and Sky is on most binoculars, so you have the focus on this part, right? And then you have the opposite of that on the hinge, closest to the objectives. This bit oftentimes can be unscrewed, and there is a standard screw fitting in there. Sorry. So here it is. That's what it looked like in the binocular. And you can see that little screw fitting. You can actually put a tripod adapter in here, and then you can have your binoculars just like a spotting scope on a tripod. So that's kind of an interesting feature. Not all binoculars have that, but the vast majority do. These are Kowas, they have it. Most Nikons, Vortex have it. Some of the other brands like Swarovski and Zeiss have a different kind of fitting. If their barrel is a little different and has a fixture too close to the front to accommodate a binocular adapter, there'll be another way to do it. So you can just give us a call at the shop and learn about that. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the numbers on a binocular. You're probably familiar with these. In this case, it is 8 by 32. You might also have an 8 by 42, 10 by 42, and I'd like to talk about the importance of those numbers. The first number, in this case, 8x, is the power or the magnification of the binocular. As I'm looking at a bird through this binocular, that bird is going to appear 8 times closer than it would with the naked eye. Most birders use an 8x binocular, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The second number is important too, in this case, 32. The 32 is millimeters. It's the diameter of this objective lens in millimeters. So 8 is the power, 8x, by 32, the diameter of this objective module. The reason that's important to you when you're doing birding is that the more light and color travel down this dark barrel to your eye, the better your brain can make out detail. So when I'm looking at 2 yellow and gray warblers, right, I have to be able to see a fair amount of detail to figure out which one is which. So as I'm looking at tiny things like, you know, does it have an eye ring, or what is the shape on the end of the beak, things like this, the more light and color down that barrel, the better I can make out detail and figure out what that warbler is. The downside to increasing the size of that objective lens is that it increases the size of the whole binocular, right? So here's an 8 by 32 and an 8 by 42. You can see the difference in the size of those objective lens. So this binocular is going to seem lighter. The picture will seem lighter, and my brain will probably be able to make out detail a bit better, but you can see what I'm sacrificing is size and weight. So if I'm doing shorebirds and I'm in a constant location, I probably want the biggest and highest magnification binocular I can hold still. But if I'm really trekking through the woods and I'm looking at warblers in the spring migration, I'm probably going to take a fairly small binocular just so that I don't get tired of using it. It can, you know, they can get heavy after a bit, right? If you've been out in the field for a while, both around your neck and even just to hold them up for a great deal of time. And we want your experience birding to be as comfortable as possible. So that's kind of the important parts of the binocular. If you have any questions, just start putting those in the chat and we'll address those at the end. And I'm going to move on to the next part, and that is binoculars for birding specifically. Binoculars come in lots of different shapes and sizes. This shape is probably what your parents had, right? That old school shape. We call that poro prism. More popular right now is roof prism design with a straight barrel. Either one will work fine for birding. Again, truly, either one's fine. If you have this, it's a great binocular. You don't see those as often anymore, but they're great. Most birders use an 8x42. As we mentioned, that 8x is the amount of magnification. 42 gives you a big enough objective that it's pretty easy to see light and color traveling down that dark barrel to your eye so that you can make out the details in the birds. If you'd like a little more power or magnification than that, and if you're pretty steady in your hand holding and you don't have a lot of shake and shimmy, then you might consider looking at a 10x42. That 10x binocular, that is a fair amount of additional magnification. So if you're looking particularly at raptors or things that are kind of far away, having that extra bit of magnification can really help to bring those birds in close enough to make a good identification and just enjoy seeing the detail on those birds. So for backyard birding, an 8x is great. For, trekking through the woods and looking at warblers, an 8x is usually great. There are some instances in which a 10x can be helpful to you. As I mentioned before, the objective comes in lots of different sizes. Pocket binoculars can have one that's just 20 or 25 millimeters. It's quite small. The challenge there is you don't get a very wide field of view. And so there's no formula I can give you to calculate field of view, unfortunately, because it depends not just on the power and the diameter of the objective, but also on where the lens placement is within that binocular. But you can look up field of view on our website at landseaskyco.com or at any of the manufacturer websites. And that is something to take into consideration as you are looking for binoculars for birding. So just to recap, an 8x42 is what most birders will use in the field. If they want something a bit smaller, an 8x32 is a really common one to see. And usually will do the trick unless you're looking at really under bad lighting conditions. Dawn and dusk, it's better to have more light. So you might want a larger binocular. And then 10x42 is certainly something to look at. So that kind of recaps the binoculars for birding specifically. I'll quickly address other uses of binoculars. Honestly, an 8x42 will work in most circumstances for anything you would use binoculars for. So if you have a concert to go to or a football game or whatever additional uses you have, an 8x42 is going to be fine for that. So you can feel comfortable buying that birding binocular, and if later on you decide that's not the hobby for you, your binoculars are still going to serve you well in other respects. I mentioned the 10s being okay if you're very steady in hand holding. If you or one of your relatives or friends has a more tremorous hold on binoculars, there's a workaround for that. The magnification will magnify any vibration you have in that binocular. But there are binoculars available that are lesser magnification, including this one. This is a little Koa binocular. It's only $100. It's a 6x30. And why that's important is the 6X is lesser magnification. So if there is some shake in my hand holding, I'm not going to notice as much as with the 8 or 10X binocular. Also, a 30 millimeter lens here with 6X is still enough field of view to do some decent birding, but it means it's a much smaller and lighter weight binocular. So for folks, again, that are very old, very young, for whatever reason, may have a little tremor in their hand holding, this is a great binocular for them. We sell tons of these to camps and schools and things of that nature. It's a robust binocular, nice, easy to use, integrated really large focus wheel here. And so that little Poro Prism by Koa is a good one, $100, 6x30. It's a little unusual for birding, but it really will help get past some of the problems that we have if we're not so steady. So that is kind of binoculars for birding. The next thing I promised to talk about is what's new in binoculars. And truly in this last year, things have been so nuts with COVID, but we do have one exciting new binocular on hand. This is the Swarovski NL Pure. It's a really unusual design, as you can see, because instead of that barrel being straight, it has this really interesting divot. And what that design is doing is it's pinched off here, is it's creating a really ridiculously huge field of view. So this binocular is an 8x42 binocular. It's lighter weight and smaller than their previous premium model, the EL. And this NL Pure in an 8x42 has a 20% larger field of view than their older model, the EL. The EL is still on the market, but this seems to be their newest, latest and greatest thing in binoculars. So again, that's the NL Pure. That's an 8x42. Isn't that a strange design with that little pinch here? But it really allows that view to flare out and get a ridiculously wide field of view. That comes in an 8x42, a 10x42, and a 12x42. So if you have a really steady handhold, it's really worth it to look at the 12x42. It's a remarkable amount of magnification. Usually that additional magnification, you'd be so zoomed in that it would lessen the field of view. So maybe not the perfect binocular for birding. But on this one, because of the pinch design and the wide field of view, it actually works really beautifully for bird watching. And so with that, Kelsey and Kaylee, do you want to let me know if we have any questions?
Yes, we do have a couple questions. And first off, I just wanted to say what a great presentation, because I have learned so much about the binoculars I've had for years. I never knew about that tripod adapter, and sure enough, I have one. That is amazing. So I'm really glad I tuned in today.
I'm so glad you did too.
Yeah, but we do have a couple questions. So the first one is there a binocular that is good for birding, but also good for looking at stars? Would you have a recommendation for something like that?
I see that, Lisa. Thank you for that question. That's an awesome question. And yes, all of your binoculars, first of all, are super awesome on the moon. So the first thing you should do tonight, if it's clear out, is go check out the moon through your binoculars. But for folks that come in and want to do astronomy with binoculars, we usually recommend a 10x50 or 12x50. Again, that's 10 or 12x magnification and an objective that's just a little bit bigger than this. This is a 42 millimeter, a 50 millimeter works really beautifully for astronomy, and still is small enough to handhold and use for daytime nature viewing. So that's a really great kind of 24/7 binocular in a 10x50 or 12x50. Specifically, I want to talk about price points, which I did not cover earlier, but this is a good place to introduce that. If you want a fairly inexpensive set of binoculars that will do well for both, I would recommend the Vortex Diamondback series is in the $200 price range, and those will come all the way up to the 10x50 and 12x50s. And those are just a really great all-around choice. If you want to move up optically, what you're paying for when you have a more expensive binocular is really the coatings on the glass. So the exterior casing and all the bits and bobs, not a lot of difference between $200 and $2,000. But what you are paying for is the glass or fluorite and the coatings on the glass. So these binoculars that I have here today that I have held up are all multi-coated, meaning there's lens coatings, just like on your glasses, on every surface of every piece of glass throughout that barrel. What that does is just get you true light and color through the barrel. This is the Leica Noctivid binocular. Leica, of course, is a camera company. That technology goes beautifully into sport optics. This has the truest color representation of any binocular that I know of on the market. So you can tell they're using that technology from their camera lenses here in the Noctivid binocular. So again, a lower price point for both astronomy and birding would be the Vortex Diamondback. Kind of mid-range, maybe the Vortex Viper or Razors would also be good. If you want to get into a higher dollar binocular, you'd look at something in the premium lines like Leica, Swarovski, or Zeiss. So I hope that that helps. And that's a great question. And both through spotting scopes like this one, this is a little Kowa spotting scope I have, 55 millimeter back here, and binoculars. People don't think of them for astronomy, but they really work beautifully on the moon and planets.
Wonderful. Okay, I have a couple other. Deborah asks, can you talk about the benefit of using a tripod or other stabilizer for binoculars?
Yes. So there are many times in that you'll find a tripod is really helpful to have. And if you look at our website, which is, I see that's a question too, landseaskyco.com, and check out Binocular adapter. There's one by Vortex that's just $19.99 and works really beautifully. So again, that binocular adapter is going to go in right here, and then it will just seat into the quick release plate on the mount of your camera tripod really easily. The advantages of that are things like here in Houston, I'm sure there with Lake Travis and everything, there's lots of people that have decks, or they have, ranch houses that they want to look out over, a field or whatnot. And anytime that you have a far away kind of distance, it's so much easier to mount that on a tripod rather than hand holding it. And it really can be left together as one unit. So if you're looking at something, at a reason, close up, tripods are not helpful, but for a great deal of distance, they can be really helpful. Also for astronomy, for astronomical viewing, because the subject matter is so far away, it is extremely difficult to hold the binocular still enough to capture all that detail. But as you put it on a tripod and look through it, you should be able to see, like, even with just an 8 or 10x binocular, you should be able to see the Galilean moons of Jupiter across it, those 4 or 5 that it'll be traversing. And that's really neat. It looks like the sky will look dark black, and then you'll see Jupiter. And kind of in a line across Jupiter, you'll see the moons, and they'll look kind of like stars out to the edge, but they'll be in an exact line. But if any of the moons are in front of the planet, it'll look like a little black dot. And that can be a lot of fun, much easier to accomplish if those binoculars are mounted on the tripod, just because it gives you such a stable hold on that. Thanks for that good question.
Fabulous, fabulous. Okay, someone asked, can you please repeat the mid-range options? I think.
Yes, I will definitely do that. So the lesser expensive ones that we like include the Kowa. This is $100 binocular. It's the YF, as in Yankee Foxtrot, the YF series, which is $100. This comes in a 6x30 and an 8x30 and is a great binocular for $100. Moving up from there, I would suggest the Vortex Diamondback series, which run from $200 to $300. Beyond that, when you're approaching $400 and $500, the Kowa BD2 series is awesome because it has an extra wide field of view. This is one of the newest binoculars from Kowa on the market. This happens to be their 8x32, but these are awesome. Wide, generous field of view, which means if you're new to birding and you're having a hard time getting that bird in the field of view of your binoculars, this will be really forgiving. So it's a really good binocular for that purpose. And runs around $450 or so, depending on what size you get. In that same price class is the Vortex Viper binocular. When you get to $1,000, you have a lot of options. The Vortex Razor binocular is right at $999. So is the Zeiss Conquest binocular. So is the Nikon Monarch HG. That's Nikon's newest one, is also in that $999 price bracket. And there's one more. Who am I missing? I got the Zeiss Conquest. Oh, the Leica Trinovid is also in that price point, $999. If you have questions about which of those would be right for you, we're going to put my contact information in the chat, and I'm happy to talk with you via phone or email about what would be right for your particular situation. But there's a lot of good ones right at that $1,000 range. Once you get above that, you might as well go all the way up to the super premiums. And I'll tell you why. So we would consider the super premiums, the Leica Noctivid, the Swarovski EL, or this cool new NL Pure, and then the Zeiss Victory SF binocular. All of these are going to run between $2,500 and $3,000. I know that sounds like a ridiculous amount of money to pay for binoculars, but I think of it like this. If this is your main hobby, pretty much your only cost here is optics and travel, and that's it. So if you think about it compared to, golf or horseback riding or whatever, there's not those incremental costs that you're paying every month for your hobby. You really just kind of have those two things, optics and travel, the occasional field guide perhaps. So if money is no object, it's nice to go up to those super premiums. What you're gaining by going up to a super premium binocular is, of course, the magnification is going to be the same. What you're paying for truly is the coatings on the glass that are doing the very best job at transferring light and color down that barrel to your eye. Another thing that's interesting about, the more you pay, the better the optics get. There's a field flattening system that's used in these, so that as I'm looking at a kettle of hawks, right, and counting and trying to identify those hawks, the sharp-shinned hawk up in the top corner is going to be just as crisp and clear in those premium binoculars as the one right in the middle. If, like me, you bought your first pair of binoculars for $60 at Academy and you thought you were really going all out, right, and spending a lot of money, because that's how we all start. When you look through those cheaper binoculars, you'll notice that the edges of the field are horrible. And, isn't it, as a 20-year-old, you may not realize that that's kind of a big deal, or that there's any alternative to that, but there is in fact an alternative. So the more you pay for the binoculars, the better the image looks across the whole field, right? And the better and truer the color and light are coming through that binocular. So sorry, that was a short question, but a long answer, but I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to receive your phone calls or emails, and we can talk about that more in depth.
Wonderful. And yes, we will add Marcie's contact information to this chat box in just a minute. Okay, Lisa had a good question, especially for beginner birders. So how would you advise someone who is new to looking through binoculars? How would you help them, or how would you tell them how to look through binoculars?
So thank you. That is so important. And it's one of the reasons that we love people coming into the shop, or we like to be out at festivals and birding events. And we have actually been to Austin with you guys a couple of times. So you guys, I may have met you in person at one of those events, but we love being in the field with people because it's hard to know. Another thing I didn't know until I worked for Lancey and Sky was about eye cups. Nobody ever told me that happened, right? Nobody ever told me to roll that up, and what a huge difference that has made. So thank you. And the tips I would say are, use the binoculars in your backyard or off of your apartment patio before you go out birding, so that you can get used to it. And the real key pieces are getting the interpupillary distance right, and learning to focus on something close and then kind of something further away. And you can just look at, cars down the street or pigeons on the line, or whatever you have to look at outside is fine. What you want to do to get used to it is quickly being able to get the interpupillary distance right, so you have that one cohesive image, and practicing with the focus. And truly, that's it. Once you're comfortable with those two things, then the key is being able to get the bird in the field of view. And all of the birding guides that I work with say that the key is to be looking at the bird and then pull the binocular up to the eye and then you can do any of that fine adjustment. I found that really challenging when I began bird watching, and it's just a matter of practicing. And it is much easier to practice with pigeons here in downtown Houston than it is anything else. They are so good about sitting still. So don't worry about looking for rare birds at the beginning. Just practice with the binoculars with whatever white-winged doves or sparrows or whatever you have around the house. And that seems to be the best way to get used to it. The more you use the binoculars, the more intuitive it becomes and the more natural it will be to get the bird in the field of view. But if you're having trouble with that, just know you're not alone. It just takes a lot of practice, and just hang in there. Eventually it will become more natural.
Yeah, it really is a skill, isn't it?
Truly is a skill. Yes, practice makes perfect.
Absolutely. Okay, we have a question. Is there any particular time when binoculars go on sale? And now might be a good time to talk about the discount code, and I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kelsey. It's a funny thing. Binoculars rarely go on sale. When the manufacturer does a sale, all of the vendors like me, the dealers will do lots of advertising about it because it happens so rarely. However, there's an exception. The manufacturers usually partner with us if we're doing some sort of birding event because they want to become ingrained in that birding community. And so then they will allow us to discount, which usually we can't. There's something called minimum advertised price, and we are all required to only advertise down to that minimum advertised price. So rarely, almost always, if I look up a price for this Koa binocular, it's going to be the same across the US and sometimes across the globe. So rarely will they go on sale. But if you're attending an event like this one, we're allowed then, and we usually lean on the manufacturers to share in a discount. So we'll pony up a little bit, and we'll ask them to pony up a little bit and to give us permission to go against that term and condition that requires us to only sell things at MAP. So today is a perfect example. Since I'm here talking to you guys, we're going to give you guys a specific code. It's going to be Travis for Travis Audubon, and you can put it on our website in your, after you've got binoculars in the cart. You can put in discount code Travis. It'll give you 10% off through the end of the day tomorrow. So thank you for asking that. There's not seasonal discounts like there are in many other retail products, but usually if you see me out at an event or on a Zoom session like this, there's usually going to be a discount code associated with it. And that is definitely the best time to buy optics. If a discount is helpful to you, then I would encourage you to see us at an event like this. That's the best thing to do. Once in a blue moon, they'll have a discount, but it's really infrequent. Another thing I'd like to add is, just like cars and sewing machines and kettlebell weights, optics has been negatively affected by COVID. The factories were shut down for about 7 weeks, about the time they figured out how to safely work and reopen those factories. Europe and the US and Canada shut down, and that caused a run on optics. We are pretty well in stock with most binoculars and spotting scopes at this juncture. But as you've probably read, like in the New York Times, even shipping things from overseas to the US is a real mess right now. What took 3 weeks before COVID takes a minimum of 3 months now. So I would just say, do not wait till the last minute to buy something. If you have a trip coming up, you want to act on that really quickly because truly the stock situation is just a little funky right now. And I think it'll take a year or two to move past that.
That's great advice, Marcie. Okay, we'll have time for just one last question. So this is from Deborah. Could you briefly mention the differences between binoculars and spotting scopes?
Yes, Deborah, and thank you. So the difference, there's 2 key differences. One is magnification, whereas I have a fixed power binocular. It's either 8x or 10x or whatever. That's as much magnification as I can ever get out of this binocular. With a spotting scope, I have the opportunity to zoom on the eyepiece. So spotting scopes will start something like 15 to 20x, and we'll be able to zoom all the way up to 40, 50, even 60 or 70x in some cases. It depends on the size of the scope. So that's the first thing. For most birding, I use this. For shorebirds, I use this. I don't like to carry this in the field. It's too bulky for me, but you'll see a lot of people carrying them in the field. If I'm going to set up somewhere where I know I'm just going to hop out of the car and set the thing up, then there's no reason not to have my spotting scope. We sell tons of these for birding. They're great for shorebirds. They're also pretty decent for astronomy, to be honest with you. But also for folks going to Yellowstone, anytime you're looking like at things that are far away, bison, wolves, bears, things of that nature, this is your friend. That additional magnification for long distances is really super helpful.
That's wonderful. Okay, well, Marcie, this has been such an informational talk. I'm so grateful that you have been here today to give us all the information. So with that, thank you everyone so much for being here and tuning in. We are recording this presentation, so we'll get it on our YouTube channel in a day or two, but take these last few moments to copy that discount code Travis, because it's only good today and tomorrow. And yeah, Marcie, any final words before we let people go?
No, but thank you for joining us via Zoom. We can't wait to be back with you guys in the Austin area as soon as possible. But yeah, thanks very much. And don't hesitate to call me or shoot me an email if you have any additional questions.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. And I hope to see all of you soon on the trails. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.